A few years ago, Barack Obama said that the cost of healthcare for the elderly, meaning general cost of healthcare for people over 65, had crossed the $1 trillion threshold, and it's going up really, really quickly. And if you look at an analysis from the different agencies that are responsible for tracking these kinds of things, it's going up as a percentage. It's not just going up, it's going up as a percentage of GDP. So our population in the United States and in Europe is getting older. Populations everywhere are getting older as we become better at delivering vaccines and other forms of healthcare. And as that population goes up, the percentage of GDP that is dedicated to treating the diseases of aging goes up and up and up. Now, somewhere in the future, between 2030 and 2050, we're going to be looking at a reality where if we continue providing care the way we provide it now, we're going to be spending half of GDP on treating the diseases of aging, and we're going to be treating them in a way that makes everybody the most miserable. So we are either going to be faced with lowering the standard of care below what we're able to provide because we can no longer afford to give people the state-of-the-art care, or we're going to change the way we do medicine. So Aubrey and I and my other co-founders 10 years ago founded SENS Research Foundation to start a revolution and change the way we do medicine. I'm not talking about providing snake oil answers to complicated problems. I'm talking about changing the way we define the diseases of aging to focus in on the damage that underlies the aging. And when you address those, you can actually remove the underpinnings that cause the resulting pathologies. Heart disease is a great example. As a matter of fact, heart disease is one of the few examples where you have a single kind of damage that may be very closely associated to the single biggest killer in the world, atherosclerosis. In many cases, I'm talking about multi-component damage addressing many different kinds of disease, so it's very hard to get people to think about it in terms of, well, we'll treat Alzheimer's by removing A-beta aggregation. Well, that may not be enough. There may be a lot of other things you need to do. But the cardiovascular system is probably pretty robust at self-repair, except that macrophages, which are the blood cells that are responsible for crawling through the artery walls and looking for cholesterol particles and cleaning them up. These macrophages will get these oxidized cholesterol particles, just a natural process of reacting. It's a highly oxidized environment inside of the cell. The cholesterol is going to get a little rusty when it's in there, but these oxidized cholesterol derivatives can't be processed by the lysosome of the macrophage. So the macrophage becomes a sick, what we call foam cell. The foam cell becomes the necrotic core of an atherosclerotic plaque, and that is the thing that gives you the thrombotic event, and then you have the stroke out or the heart attack out, and you're done. Now, the way we treat it now is we wait until your arteries are about occluded and we do your triple bypass, or we wait until you have your stroke and we teach you how to talk again, or you have your heart attack and then we tell you to take a low-dose aspirin forever. What we'd like to do is actually look at whether you couldn't address that root cause of that 7-keto cholesterol accumulation, back that process up, and render those macrophages more immune to the oxidized cholesterol particles so that they can get back to work of cleaning up the cardiovascular system. This way, even if atherosclerosis is set down a little bit, you might be able to reverse it back and revert back to an earlier state. It's classical regenerative medicine, but people usually think of regenerative medicine as complicated tissue engineering or stem cell engineering. When we say regenerative medicine, we mean it in the way Bill Hazeltine originally defined it, which is just restoration of normal bodily function, even if you can get there with a small molecule or anything. Remove the underlying underpinnings that are causing age-related disease, and you may be able to stop age-related disease. When we started the foundation, the argument wasn't, this is the only way to do it. The argument was this: there's a huge amount of money going into trying to control the metabolic rate of aging, both medically and in terms of fitness programs and nutraceuticals, and that entire environment is about slowing down the biological rate at which you are getting old. And there's, of course, a gargantuan industry around treating the diseases of aging once you have them. And both of these industries are important, and they've done good work. Both of my parents are alive because of advances that have been made in cancer over the last 20 years. So I'm grateful for that. But there's almost no energy that goes into the center where there's this occurring damage that isn't yet defined by anybody as a disease in itself, and yet it's occurring day by day until basically it renders the system into enough imbalance that you define it as an AMA classified disease, as atherosclerosis or Alzheimer's disease or any other condition. And the amount of money that goes into looking at whether we could address that component and revert that back to an earlier stage is measurably very minimal. As a matter of fact, when we started the organization, our organization has never had a budget above $5 million. Your yearly budget runs about $4 to $5 million a year. That's just what we're able to do. We're a public charity, so we depend on benefactors, and we do what we can with it. We get a lot done for the money, but it's not a big budget. The NIA's budget when we started was, I think, about $1.1 billion. That's the National Institute of Aging. And they had a division of biology of aging, and their budget was about $160 million. It's probably a little bit larger now. I'm quoting numbers from about 10 years ago. But as far as we could tell from the research we saw about what that money was going into, it might have been as little as $10 million actually looking at applications that would be designed to try to undo the normal damage that's occurring. $10 million from the world's largest funder of medical research. And you know, the National Institutes of Health are generally regarded as one of the biggest pipelines that you can have for technologies that will come out and be addressed by industry and picked up by industry and turned into real products. And if they're not in there just creating that pipeline, then nothing's going to happen. So it was astonishing to us that within a couple of years of starting, we're funding $4 to $5 million worth of research. We might have been doing half of what the largest nonprofit funder, you know, the NIH, is doing in the same field. You know, maybe some of these research avenues are dead ends. That's quite possible. But again, we're not going to know until we put the money in. And if we're spending $1 trillion, you know, what is going to be very soon, if not already, $1 trillion a year managing cardiovascular disease, and there might be a simple solution where we could provide a small molecule that might be able to get in there and revert that disease, but for the investment of maybe $10 to $100 million worth of research, we're going to waste a lot of money and a lot of lives.